Hey, Ben, so talk to us about insurance. Tell me one or a couple methods or suggestions that will help with maneuvering and guide us through the insurance game.
Hi, thanks, Michael, for having me back on again. So in the past, I'd say 12 to 18 months, I've been pretty active about dropping PPOs. I know we've all been hit by inflation, staff costs going up, but our reimbursements from insurance companies either stayed flat or gone down. So that's really been eating away at our profits. So I've been in my startup, which I opened up, I'm just under about 4 years in now. I've been very proactive with dropping PPOs. And when I dropped my first one, I mean, it's a scary process. I dropped one that literally represented two families. It was Humana, and it was
Mhm.
still kind of nerve wracking because I didn't know the process. I didn't know how long it would take. I wasn't sure how to reach out to patients. There was just a lot of questions. So now that I've dropped quite a few plans, because I did go in network with quite a few when I first opened, I have a little bit of experience, and I want to help out some of your listeners. Maybe they have a startup, maybe they're have an acquisition of a dental office and they're looking to drop PPOs because they've seen their profit numbers shrink, and they want to just get organized and have a strategic plan moving forward with that.
All right, man. Yeah.
So okay. So the first thing I look at when dropping a PPO is not actually my fee schedule. It's going to be my actual office schedule. So I view each PPO as just a marketing channel, just the same as ground marketing, Facebook ads, SEO, Google reviews, your signage, walk-ins, stuff like that. It's just a channel to attract patients. Some of you might say that sounds a little weird. I mean, I'm not paying anything for the insurance companies. Well, the way you pay, and I'm going to put that, pay in air quotes, is through the insurance adjustment. It's almost like a commission you're paying Delta Dental, MetLife, GEHA, Cigna, whatever, for the privilege of seeing these patients and have them be directed towards you. Because the way they advertise is putting you on a list that their employer provides for these people. I mean, that's not much different than if you paid to be on a list in Yellow Pages or, a website or something that lists a bunch of doctors on there. So it's just a marketing channel. So when you're dropping a PPO, all you're doing is eliminating a marketing channel, and you want to have strategies to replace that in your schedule so your production numbers can stay the same or hopefully even improve over time. Whenever I look at dropping a PPO, it's a double-edged sword. You're going to increase your profitability overall, per patient, but you're worried that you're going to lose patients overall. So your revenue number might go down, but your profitability number will go up, which might seem a little confusing. I like to visualize it as like a pie. So my pie might be getting a little smaller, the total area of it, if looking down on it, but it's getting like, thicker. I'm getting a thicker piece of pie, and that's my profitability number, even though it might be slightly smaller. So, you just want to kind of be evaluating that. But when I'm the next step I'm doing when I'm dropping a PPO is I want to first, and this is probably super obvious, is you want to see which ones you're in network with. Hopefully you have a list of that already, but you also want to see which ones that are being leased out or under an umbrella plan. So I got a letter from United Concordia, which we dropped, but they still sent us a letter about this saying they're merging with someone else. And so I was going to also, if I was still in United Concordia, be in network with that other plan that they were merging with. And this is really important because when you look to drop a plan and it actually represents 3 or 4 plans, you could be dropping a much larger portion of your patient base than you might realize. And then all of a sudden you might have holes in your schedule and you're just not prepared for that. Dropping a plan that represents 2% of your production is very different than dropping a plan that's like 20% of your production. One's a lot more scary than the other, and so you want to know what you're getting into, so you don't have some big surprise or just in a situation where you feel like you need to back down and go back and network with the insurance plan, which is going to be a huge headache and something you definitely want to avoid of hopping back and forth. So after we know which plans to network with and also how, so you want to ask them if it's direct, leased, or if it's under an umbrella. We want to actually look at our production numbers. So I don't look at headcount from patients. I actually look at the amount of production I'm getting from each of these plans. Because let's say one demographic, you're getting a bunch of healthy young 20-year-olds who don't need a lot of work. And a different demographic, you're getting, 60 or 70-year-olds and you're doing more crown and bridge indentures, which is a, much higher production number. So both of those categories might have the same head count of patients, but one might represent 2 or 3 times as much production. So you want to be, I like to look at production numbers and not patient head count numbers as like, leading indicator for how much this might affect my production numbers at the end of the month, because that's really what I'm tracking, is how much I produce, not how many patients I see each month is what I don't choose to focus on. Now we're actually going to look at fee schedules. When looking at fee schedules, you want to be careful and actually look at your top 20 to 30 most productive codes. You can pull that. I use EagleSoft, but in Dentrix, Open Dental, any of these software, you can get similar data and look at your production numbers and then separate out your top 20 to 30 production codes. I'm a little more sophisticated with it, and I like to separate how many units I produce at each of these. So that way I can plug it all into a spreadsheet, and that's going to show me how much I'm actually getting paid for these top 20 bundles of procedures and how many units of each that I'm doing. A lot of these are going to include some boring stuff like a periodic exam, your comp exam. It's not all going to be your veneers and your other big cases, because you're just going to probably be doing a lot of high volume of kind of that bread and butter boring stuff that you don't think about too much. But those could have a huge impact on your collections because you're doing so many of those each month. One thing you do want to be careful with when you look at a fee schedule is some of the insurance companies, they'll actually offer you a fee schedule that has a really high reimbursement for crowns and lower for everything else, because they know docs are just going to look at the crown number and not necessarily go deeper into this. I recently dropped a plan and they sent me 2 fee schedules, and there was a difference about 8% or so, which might not sound like a lot, but if you look at your production each month, getting paid an extra 8% is, can add up quite a bit. And they had one plan, the crowns paid better, but literally every other code other than crown and bridge, they paid noticeably less. And if I didn't look at my top 20 most productive codes, I wouldn't have realized that. And by the way, the first fee schedule they send you doesn't have to be the last. So if you drop a plan and they offer you a higher fee schedule, I would definitely try and push at least for another one that's a bit higher, because they have higher fee schedules. They're just not giving it to you. But now that we know, and Michael, if you want, I can go in some more personal experience with that if you want. But now that we know, how we're in network with all these plans, the percentage of production of all these plans, we know these fee schedules, so we can see which ones are worse paying. We can now kind of have a game plan for dropping an insurance. So we pick one, let's say it represents 5% of our production. So worst case scenario, we lose 5% of our production each month. Not a happy position to be in. So first, we want to have retention strategies. You want to have a strategy to reach out to these patients. I would do it in person when they come into the office. If they're not due anytime soon, I would actually call them. And this is on top of sending them a letter. In the letter, you don't want to say, hey, we're at a network because we want to make more money because I want to buy a boat. That's not going to really help your patients, stay in the office. What you want to kind of let them know is this is for patient quality care, that you don't want to shorten appointments. You don't want to use lower quality labs. You don't want to use worse dental materials. You want to be able to support your team and staff so they can support their own families. And the lower reimbursement with certain insurance companies just doesn't make that possible. When you do the math on some of these insurance plans, if you look at your overhead, you might actually be losing money when some of these plans, because they pay so little. And so you'd be better off, with an empty spot and trying to put a different patient in that spot with some of these really low PPOs. And I'm not just talking about Medicaid. I'm talking about PPOs, really bad PPOs. Yeah, so okay. Now that you've reached out to these patients, and hopefully you're retaining as much as possible. For me, for the plans I've dropped, I've retained about 80% of my patient base, but I like to estimate that I'm going to lose half, just to be on the safe side. And so now that we have a retention strategy in place to try and keep these patients, you want to actually reach out to the insurance companies and actually try and drop these plans. They're not always going to make this easy. I first thought I would send them the paperwork. They would respond back and say, I have a drop date. Maybe it's 90 days from now. And that would be in the end of it. But it's weird. I send them something and they don't seem to get it. And I call again and they don't get it. I fax it. They don't get it. I send it by certified mail where they had to sign for it, and all of a sudden they got it. So you do have to be persistent with this. I wouldn't drop multiple plans at once, because this is going to be a little bit of extra work for your front desk team, just reaching out for the insurance companies, getting your added network date. And also, like I mentioned, you want to have those retention strategies. So that's going to be a little extra work for your front desk team to reach out to these patients. They might have additional questions. They might have, like, oh, how much will my insurance reimburse? I've seen, some patients you're going to definitely lose where they only want to see someone in network. It's just the way they are. But quite a few other patients, if they understand that they can still utilize their benefits, they'll just have a little bit higher copay. If you've built rapport with them, you've done some good work with them, and they're happy with results, a lot of these patients I've found will stick around. And then even with some insurance plans, at least in my area, literally no one's in network with. So if these people want to go somewhere, they're going to be going to a network provider.
Okay.
So yeah, those are the basic steps I look at when I drop a plan. I've dropped quite a few because I was in network with way too many when I opened. And I find if you just get organized with this stuff, it is a little bit of work. I'm not going to deny that, but your profitability per patient could literally like double. Like if you think about this, let's say you have 30% write off on a patient. So you're billing out $100 and you're losing $30. And then you also have, we'll just say 70% overhead. And so, then you have a 30% loss there. If you see that same patient and you don't have that insurance adjustment, you are literally doubling your profitability for the amount of work you're doing for that patient, because it's not costing you anymore to do that same production on the patient. You're just not writing off, the other half of that money that, I feel like really is owed to you. I almost feel like the Delta and Delta Dental is like, the difference between what you should be paid and, what they want to pay you. I think that's where that Delta comes from in their name. Yeah, I hope this is helpful for some of the docs out there. Hopefully, I want to see other docs drop in more PPOs. I think that's going to help our profession as a whole. Also, just as a small business owner, I think it's really important to help dentists recapture and control their fees and their prices and not be dictated by a third party and really keep that autonomy in small businesses in America. So that's just a personal thing I like to see. More of us just not being controlled by a third party and have, our treatment and our fees really dictated by the actual doctor, not some person, in an office, 3 states away.
Yeah. Interesting. So there's basically like 7 to 8 steps here. But rewind a little bit if we can, real quick.
Yep.
I think that step 5 or I wrote down like it's like a step 5. Look at the fee schedules, right? Looking at the top 20 to 30 most production codes. That sounds like, even if you're not going to drop, you know what I mean? Like to check that out, to check your fee schedules and everything like that, to see, just to have your finger on the trigger with what you're producing. Talk to me a little bit more about when looking for fee schedules and calling them to try to change it.
You're talking about negotiating fee schedules or identifying your top 20 most productive codes?
Because you mentioned how you did that, and then, you notice how like they were saying, or they showed you a fee schedule where the crowns looked really good, but everything else was like, right? And then if it wasn't for you doing the due diligence, you would have gone with it because, your eyes are attracted to that crown, but you didn't. So how can we talk to the insurance company and be like, give me a better one?
Okay. So first of all, when I plan to drop a plan, I am already okay with being at a network. Because if you're like trying to just drop it just to open the door a little bit for negotiation, you're in like a weak position. So I'm already kind of even lined up and contacted patients like I'm dropping the plan. And this one in particular, I didn't approach them negotiate. They I got a lot of positive reviews in their internal system, and I think they didn't want to lose me as a provider for this particular company. So I go to drop their plan. They email me saying, hey, we got this better fee schedule. Can you think about coming back on board? And they actually did send me 2. I didn't even notice it right away. I thought they sent me the same email twice. But when I talked to them on the phone, I realized they sent me 2. And I think they were a bit surprised. I'm like, okay, let me plug this into my calculator to see which of these fee schedules is actually better for me. And they're like, what do you mean you have a calculator for this? I'm like, oh yeah, I have my own internal system for figuring out my top 20 codes, and give me like 15 minutes and I'll put this in and I'll tell you if this is something reasonable. And they're like, okay. And I think they're really kind of surprised. I'm like, yeah, I'll let you know. I let them know within an hour. And so I put in both fee schedules. It told me right away, I think it was about an 8% difference of, between the two. So the both of them were better than what they're giving me before. I think they bumped everything up. I can double check the numbers. I want to say 20% from what they offered me initially. So it meant move this fee schedule from like something that was, I think, my lowest at the time to something more average. But if it goes to average and it's equal to other insurances, like it's not really, if I've already invested the time and the energy and reached out to patients that we're going to drop this, I'm like, I need something more than that. And I told them, like, when we're dropping plans, we're keeping 80% of our patients. So, you need to make this kind of worth my while. And then they gave me another fee schedule, which was an increase of, I think, 80% from the original fees. No joke, 80%. And so they've had these fee schedules. And I had Amy, my scheduler, call a few months ago trying to negotiate with these people because we were planning on dropping them. We didn't tell them that at the time, but they just hung up on us. They're like, we don't do that. And I know there's some companies that, help with this process. So I just focus on dropping them because the difference between my fees, because of inflation and everything going up and what they reimburse, it's a huge difference. Like, you hear about docs saying like, oh, it's a 30% write-off. It might have been 30% when you first opened, but if they've kept those fee schedules flat and you've upped your fees each year, that 30% might be 40 or 50% of your fee at this point. So and I don't think they're gonna, up it, double their fees to make it comparable to being, an out-of-network provider. And then, like I said, as a personal level, I don't like them telling me what to do or not do. That's just a personal thing, not a monetary thing. But yeah, so yeah, I prepare myself. So I'm already ready to drop it. So worst case scenario, even if they offer me a higher fee schedule, I'm just, I'm okay with walking. I'm entering the negotiation that I'm okay with walking. And that's why I can push really hard for this fee schedule. A lot of the other insurance companies didn't offer this. I've had it, actually Humana, the first one I dropped, I think one of my patients complained to their employer, said that, hey, I really want to stick with this dentist. Can we offer him something? And they upped the fees. It was going to be like 3-4% increase. I'm like, no, this isn't worth it. And it represented 2 families. So I'm like, I don't want to go through the headache of going back and network with Humana just for 1 or 2 families. It's not worth it. So, it's a combination of fee schedule, your long-term goals, and percent of production that these insurance plans are representing. Something to consider, I mentioned earlier that I don't look at patient headcount, I look at production. If you have a bunch of patients who are just coming in for recall and not getting much treatment because you've done everything already, then they're going to equal a much smaller piece of your production pie compared to, let's say you're attracting new patients and they haven't been to the dentist in 5 years, and they need more crowns and bridges or whatever, fillings and scaling root planning, and they'll turn into regular hygiene patients over time after you do all their work. But those long-term patients, they're also more loyal to you. You're probably getting less production out of them because you've done all their work. And they, might need something, a new crown every 4 years or something, depending on how well they brush. But
nice. Okay, man, this is really, really helpful. I appreciate your time. And if anyone has further questions, you can definitely find them on the Dental Marketer Society Facebook group. Or Ben, where can they reach out to you directly?
So if you're interested in better understanding your numbers, because I like having docs make data-driven decisions and not emotional ones, you can find me at my website that I use for helping docs on this, and that's raisingdentalincome.com, or my email through that site is Ben, BEN, at raisingdentalincome.com. And I talk about strategies for raising revenue with the least impact on your overhead, to help increase your profitability. And dropping PPOs is a big part of that because being a network is expensive. It just is. If you have $1 million practice and you're writing off 30%, that's $300,000. That's a big marketing budget in my eyes. So yeah, dropping some of these plans because it ends up saving you a lot of money. You just got to be smart and tactical about it, or strategic about it.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much, Ben, for being with me on this Monday morning marketing episode.
All right. Thanks for letting me on.